Government and Civic Affairs Committee of the Stratford and District Chamber of Commerce. On behalf of the board, our members and our sponsors this evening, Or Insurance and Vancia Financial Group, I'd like to welcome you here tonight. It is wonderful to see so many of you out. It's a beautiful evening, and the time you've taken out of your days to come and spend with us in this democratic process to learn more about what the candidates who have stepped forward to represent us in Ottawa have to say shows a great deal for what our community has to offer. In a few moments, I will be introducing our moderator this evening. Mr. Eddie Matthews is the morning host for CJCS 1240. I'm advising you that the event tonight is being televised by Rogers, and the event will contain both remarks from our candidates as well as questions from the audience. Mr. Matthews, as our moderator, is a well-respected and well-known member of our community who can be trusted upon to ensure an independent and integral debate. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Eddie Matthews.
Thanks, everybody. It's good to see everybody here tonight, especially, first night of the regular season in the NHL, and so we've got a busy night, but I know the people on the stage here, and they're all good quality people, and just a reminder, make sure your cell phones are off too. We don't want any interruptions in here as well. I'm going to give everybody a chance to speak. I'm going to read off their bios right now, and I'll let them have a little say it to you. Irma, and we'll go in alphabetical order too. Irma DeVries is from the Christian Heritage Party. She's with her husband John, raising 4 children on their dairy farm. They've got 6 grandchildren. Since 2002, they've been actively producing green hydroelectricity in countless projects. She's been on a lot of committees and boards in our riding, 3 decades, including her church. Ladies and gentlemen, Irma DeVries. Irma, you've got 2 minutes to talk to this crowd here.
Thank you, Chamber of Commerce, for organizing this evening. My husband and I have lived here in Perth-Wellington for 24 years. We operated a dairy farm and now another 12 years a cereal farm. We're farmers and small business owners. We have a grain bin business and the water-powered hydroelectricity. For 36 years, I've volunteered in Perth-Wellington, and I've been part of disaster response teams that helped clean up in places like New Orleans. Cleaning up Canada is my passion. I believe in the inalienable, fundamental human right to life, freedom, and property ownership. The Constitution isn't a living document for unelected judges to change at whim. Our rights are given to us by our Creator. Life must come first. If a politician isn't committed to preserving your right to life, why trust them with your money? I will vote to invoke the notwithstanding clause to protect us from euthanasia, and I'll introduce laws to protect unborn children. I'll vote to enshrine the right to own private property into our Constitution. That's why I'm a founding member of the Saugeen Landowners Association. I see the world as a place for hard work, personal initiative, responsibility, not encumbered by the regulations and rules that discourage initiative and freedom. Ottawa is always interfering, taking over what's best done by families and neighbors, while activist judges foist social experiments upon us. I'm running to clean up Canada, to restore Judeo-Christian values, and to serve you, my Perth-Wellington neighbors. I look forward to listening and learning from you this evening.
Thanks, Irma. And next down the table, Roger Feuer, a lifelong resident in the area, grown up with his family of 7 on a local dairy farm, the Harmony area. Went to Northwestern, began as a tool and die maker in his career at the age of 25, started his own business as well too. Sold that in 1999, retiring at the age of 38. Good for you, Roger. Nice. We can all do that sometime. They live in St. Paul's, and he's been involved in municipal council out that way. Ladies and gentlemen, Roger Feuer.
District Chamber of Commerce. Folks, we are running out of time with only 12 days to go. This riding appears to be on the cusp of being painted blue yet again, as it has been for 54 of the last 62 years. The only red period was a short 8 years when the political right was split. Harper managed to unite the right, but the left parties failed to get the same thing done. So now, I fear, we will be waking up on October 20th to yet another 4 years of being in the Harper fold. Is this what we want? I have been listening closely to the red and orange parties beat each other up at every opportunity. Clearly, neither will stand down to let the other deliver the knockout punch to the Tories. Also, I know that the dictatorial Harper has lost some support from traditionally blue voters. My proposal? Throw your support behind me this time. I can and will represent all Perth-Wellington voters and deliver that long-awaited loss to the Blue Party. From the factory and labor workers to the farming community, the professionals and the entrepreneurs, the young and the old, the men and the women, the poor and the wealthy, I can bring your voice and concerns to Ottawa and fight for what you need. If we unite together, we will have a strong voice, one that cannot be ignored. Let's end this vote splitting right now and look forward to a brighter future here in Perth-Wellington. Just last week, a gentleman said to me, I think the Conservatives could run a dog in this riding and still win. He's likely right. We can avoid the expensive campaign promises that will continue to drastically increase the debt load on your and my grandchildren. We can be responsible and not bring in new taxes like cap and trade. We can still better our lifestyles with the use of personal initiative and good old hard work. Yet we can also have that kinder and gentler society while not...
Go ahead, just finish your last statement there.
While not having to force future generations to pay for it. Let's unite and speak with one voice in Ottawa, my voice. Thank you for your support.
There you go. Independent Roger Fuhr, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, we've got a limited amount of time here, folks. So next up, the Liberal candidate, Stephen McCotter, lifelong resident of St. Mary's, big advocate for this area too, local business owner, lawyer, former municipal councillor. He's focused on a lot of local issues important to this riding and will actively advance the interests of Perth-Wellington in Parliament. He got his degree in finance and economics from UWO, spent the next 15 years as a small business owner running the Westover Inn in St. Mary's before returning to Western to earn his law degree. Would you please welcome our Liberal candidate, Stephen McCotter.
Thanks, Eddie. Thank you to everyone for coming out tonight, and thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this important evening. This is a truly important election. I am running because this riding has become the forgotten, long-lost cousin in Ottawa. It's been neglected for too long. On a more national scale, I think Stephen Harper has had long enough running this country, and it's time for a change, and that's why I put my name forward. Tonight, I think through the debate, you'll see that there's a very clear choice for your voters in the next election. Under Justin Trudeau and my candidacy, you have a clear plan for investment and growth in the economy. The other parties will put forward a platform of austerity and cuts. Our plan for the economy after Stephen Harper's failed plan is key to tonight's debate. Stephen Harper has ran 8 consecutive deficits. He's added $160 billion to our national debt. He's had 2 recessions, and personal debt is at an all-time high. We're going to invest in infrastructure, $60 billion, $20 billion of which will flow over the next 4 years. This is not conditional on the price of oil going to $67, like my friends' budgets are, and it's not contingent on growth of 2%, which is not happening right now, like my friends are. Second of all, we're going to raise taxes on the wealthiest. The top 1% of earners are going to have their taxes go up, and we're going to lower taxes on the middle class. This will help spur the economy. Finally, we're going to help those that need it the most. We're going to create a new Canada Child Benefit. Mr. Harper and Mr. Mulcair send checks to millionaires in the form of the UCCB. We're going to stop that. We're going to make it monthly more generous and tax-free, and it's going to be income tested. The less you make, the more you're going to get. And this will help people with families, help join the middle class and get out of the struggles that they're going through. So I think through tonight you're going to see that we have a clear plan, a different plan, and I look forward to answering all your questions this evening.
Thank you, Stephen. Next up, as we head down the table, is John Nader, born in this area, born in Perth-Wellington, learned the importance of hard work at a young age growing up in his family's farm in Logan Township in West Perth. He credits his family and his community and the values they imparted for influencing his decision to pursue public service. Together with his wife, Justine, their daughter, Ainsley, John lives in Mitchell as a councillor for the municipality of West Perth between 2010 and 2014. John contributed to a lot of boards, a lot of committees, served as the chair of the Environmental Services Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome John Nader.
Good evening, and first of all, thank you to the Chamber for hosting tonight's important debate. First of all, I am a dog lover, and I do have a pet dog, and I hate to see any dog put through the abuse of running for public office, so I would never want to see that. That's a terrible thing. The Chamber of Commerces are an important voice for local businesses, and an important advocate for economic prosperity and on behalf of local businesses. The Conservative Party has been a champion for trade and market access. I'm proud to say that the much talked about TPP agreement has been reached, and it represents a historic step forward for our country. Canada is now the only country in the world with free trade access into the EU, the Americas, and the Asian Pacific continents. This represents over 60% of the world's economy. Ladies and gentlemen, that is leadership. I truly believe there's no better place to live, work, or raise a family than in Canada. This is especially true for our homes in Perth and Wellington counties. It's a place I'm proud to call home, and a place where I'm proud to raise my family. Only the Conservative Party understands that if we want to continue to maintain the advantages and prosperity we enjoy, we cannot burden tomorrow's generation with our debt. Simply put, we cannot invest in the priorities for Canadians without a strong economy and a balanced budget. Whether it is pension splitting for seniors, enhancements to support for families, a home renovation tax credit, or the lowest federal tax burden since John Diefenbaker was Prime Minister, we stand committed to working on behalf of all Canadians. Our government has increased infrastructure funding to historic levels. We've increased health and social transfers to the provinces to the highest rates ever, and we have done this while reducing taxes. We cannot afford to toss away these achievements. I'm running to be a strong voice for Perth-Wellington. Tonight, I'm here to listen to your concerns and share with you where I stand on the issues that matter to the people of Perth-Wellington. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And last but not least, Ethan Rabidoux, who has been a strong voice for Perth-Wellington, both as a broadcaster and an outspoken community advocate as well. Best known for his work in radio in the area, Ethan served local listeners for a number of years as an anchor, reporter, voice of the Culletons. In that time, he also used his voice to support a lot of community groups and raised thousands of dollars for local charities. Prior to that, Ethan served a few years in the Canadian Armed Forces. Ladies and gentlemen from the NDP, Ethan Rabidoux.
Well, thank you, Eddie, and thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for putting tonight's event on, and thank you all for coming. I know we're 10 weeks into an 11-week campaign, but thank you for sticking with us. I'm looking forward to a great discussion this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, this election is about change. For 150 years, we have alternated liberal, conservative, liberal, conservative. Over the last 3 decades, these parties have embraced an agenda that promotes privatization, austerity, cutting back on social services while giving away massive tax breaks to corporations in the hopes that it will trickle down. The two old parties represent a continuation of this discredited approach that has given us healthcare privatization, crumbling infrastructure, absolutely no federal leadership on the environment, and perhaps worst of all, the fastest growing segment of food bank users right here in Perth-Wellington and across this great nation are workers. This approach has failed, but they will continue it regardless of what they tell you during an election campaign. We have seen this time after time. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, as John just mentioned, is more of the same, and we are not bound to it. But I have a hunch this is going to come up more later on, so I'll just leave that there for the time being. The NDP is offering up a different vision for Canada. Tom Mulcair has produced a fully costed, responsible, progressive platform that invests in our priorities, creates good, stable, long-term jobs while ensuring that future generations are not saddled with debt. Our priorities include healthcare. The NDP brought in universal health care, and we will repair the damage that's been done. We'll invest in pensions to ensure seniors retire with dignity after a lifetime of honest labor, pharmacare to control the cost of prescription drugs, and national strategies for tackling infrastructure, childcare, ending violence against women, Alzheimer's and dementia, and expanding our manufacturing sector. I look forward to discussing all these ideas with you this evening. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you, Ethan. We're going to be doing some questions, and we'll start with Irma first and then work down. Everybody will get a bit of time to do that. And if you have any questions, you can bring them up to Jeff. I know he's got a few questions already, and we'll get to your questions in just a moment. But our first question this evening, manufacturing. Manufacturing is a key driver of the economy in this province, especially this area. The federal government has an important role to play in creating the conditions for this sector's growth. How will you and your party improve the manufacturing sector's connections to Canada and the world? Irma.
First, CHP Canada would borrow from the Bank of Canada, not the chartered banks, and we'd offer loans to manufacturers and cities to rebuild infrastructure. By not paying interest, our economy would grow, and by removing the money from circulation when the loans are repaid, this program would be non-inflationary. Second, we'd revitalize our economy with a fair tax based on your right to own private property. Your income belongs to you. The government shouldn't be able to say, give me half or 42%. The fair tax removes all federal income, estate, and capital gains taxes and replaces them with one simple, visible federal retail sales tax. It's equitable, and it creates jobs and provides a major boost to industry's competitiveness.
Good. Thanks, Irma. Roger, how would you help out with this question?
I will advocate relentlessly for program dollars to get where they need to go, rather than being caught up in the bureaucracy. I will cite the recent example of the largely unused Automotive Innovation Fund. The requirements to participate in this program were simply too difficult, and so then what is the good of the program? It serves no purpose other than to create jobs for the endless stream of sunshine list bureaucrats. When the manufacturing sector is actually able to access programs, this will be the key to improving this sector's ability to connect with the rest of Canada and the world. We have plenty of good government programs in this country, but the mess of red tape that we have to go through in order to access these programs is one of the greatest hindrances to not only the automotive sector, but Canadians in general who are trying to apply for and actually receive the benefits of the program that they need.
Okay, thank you so much, Roger. Stephen, how would you improve the manufacturing sector in this area for Canada and bringing us to the world?
Sure, well, there's no question that manufacturing in southwestern Ontario has been decimated under Stephen Harper's watch. I looked today and I think there were about 1,500 jobs between Stratford and St. Mary's and 3 plants alone that have disappeared while he's been Prime Minister. So I think we need to do 4 things. Number one, we need to kickstart our economy here, and that goes back to the plan I talked about, our investment in infrastructure, our tax cuts to the middle class, and investing in people that need the money the most. Number 2, I'd sign better trade deals. I read today that Stephen Harper has ran 55 consecutive months of trade deficits. That is why we're not selling our product abroad. Number 3, we need to innovate. The Liberal Party invests $200 million in innovative manufacturers and a further $100 million in innovation research. So I think when you grow the economy, you sign better trade deals, and you innovate, you'll help manufacturing in the riding.
Okay, Stephen, let's move on to John Nader. How would you help out in this area?
So manufacturing is absolutely essential to Southern Ontario, and that's really why I'm proud that our government has committed to focusing on that issue in this area. We've introduced the Advanced Manufacturing Fund, which funds innovative research in this field to get the new technologies, new issues to market faster. Just last month, we announced the new manufacturing hub, Advanced Manufacturing Hub, to be taking place in Southern Ontario. The key with the Advanced Manufacturing Hub is that it's in collaboration with the industry. It's a partnership. It's government and industry working together to find new technologies, new ways of doing business to really impact this manufacturing base so we can create the goods that we can sell worldwide through our new and improved trade deals. We currently have trade deals with now over 50 countries worldwide thanks to the new TPP. We do have Finally, one quick point. $1.85 billion in weekly salaries are attributed to the manufacturing industry. We need to reduce the cost of doing business by keeping payroll taxes low for those who are earning business.
Okay, thank you, John. Last but not least, Ethan, would you like to respond and let us know what you would do if you were elected?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, manufacturing has been decimated. We've lost 400,000 jobs under Stephen Harper's watch, and this goes back to an economic strategy that put all the economic eggs into one basket, oil and gas, and then when the price of oil cratered, we were up the river. We need a balanced national industrialized strategy. Canada is the only industrialized nation that doesn't have one for automotive and aerospace that balances development across the country. The NDP will create an innovation tax credit for businesses that invest in machinery, equipment, and property used in research and development. The NDP will extend the accelerated capital cost allowance for manufacturing that's set to expire this year, and we're also committed to meeting with the provinces to break down interprovincial trade barriers. This is something the premiers have been asking for the federal government to do. Of course, the federal government has not met with the premiers on anything, let alone this issue. There will be federal leadership to knock down those trade barriers as well.
Thanks, Ethan. We're going to open it up for a bit of a debate here, if we can be civil about it, and I'll interrupt just in case we start stomping on each other and that. But I'll open the floor if anybody wants to see and dispute anything. I know John wanted to open things up.
Just one quick point. Another thing that I think is important for this area and this part of Ontario is Pedde Ontario. This is a five-year, $1 billion fund, and we've now renewed it for a second five-year period to invest in new technologies, new ways of doing things in our country, and investing in those businesses that are really innovating and making new technologies and new businesses.
Ethan, you wanted to respond?
Just to touch, I guess, throw another log on the fire there, but the Trans-Pacific Partnership, it has to be addressed. I think it's the elephant in the room right now. The NDP is all for trade and for expanding trade opportunities. We are not in favor of negotiating trade agreements in secret during federal election campaigns, and Tom Mulcair is the only federal leader. Thank you. Tom Mulcair is the only federal leader who has said we will not be bound by this trade agreement. For example, the Prime Minister has announced there's going to be $1 billion in compensation to bail out the auto sector for the losses that will incur over the next 10 years. Bailing out companies is not an economic strategy. It's what you do when an economic strategy has failed. We will not be bound to this trade agreement, and I have a hunch there's a whole lot more little Kinder Surprises buried inside the TPP once we crack it open.
Right. Anybody else? Irma?
I have to ask, why would any business invest in Ontario today? With this new pension plan, all these edicts from government agencies, it's actually punishing you for having a business here in Ontario. We need to change this red tape and make it far easier to do business. We have lots of other party platforms that you should look at on our website at chp.ca, because fringe parties bring much needed debate and dissent to our democracy. We're offering new ideas, such as our personal income security account to replace our CPP. So check it out and let's talk about some new ideas. The same old is not working.
Okay. We've still got a few minutes. Roger?
The government has typically produced red tape level after red tape level, bureaucracy after bureaucracy, and every time I hear my fellow candidates talk about this new program and that new program, I can't help but think about more bureaucracy and more forms for business owners to fill out. And they don't want to fill out forms. They want to get down to doing their business. We need to make it easier for people in this province to do business.
Stephen, I know you wanted to respond to that.
Sure, I heard my friends in answer to the manufacturing question made a bunch of promises, but what they didn't mention was that Stephen Harper brought in the Balanced Budget Act this year. He's legislatively required to balance the budget. To run a surplus this year, he raided the EI fund, he shut off spending to veterans, he sold GM shares at a loss to come in at a surplus. He has to balance the budget next year. It's going to require 2% growth and $67 oil. It's in the 40s right now. If it doesn't get there, promises are going to be broken and cuts are going to be brought in. You need to look at every promise in that vision, and Mr. Mulcair, unfortunately, has adopted the exact same promise to balance the budget at all costs. First thing they're going to do is balance the budget, then they're going to look at what promises they don't fulfill and what cuts they're going to make.
Okay. We've got a minute and a half left. We'll get to Ethan, and then we'll end off with John.
Okay, to talk about this price of oil thing that Mr. McCotter keeps tossing out here, our plan is not based on oil going to $67 a barrel. Our plan is based on the current price of oil and on updated growth figures from the Parliamentary Budget Office and the Bank of Canada. If the Liberals want to dispute that, they can take it up with them.
John, you got the last word here.
Sure, thank you. Just a quick thing on the TPP. The NDP, we've signed about 50 trade deals. I think the NDP has supported one. Is that right?
Korea.
Korea, so they supported one trade deal. What they would do is sell out our country's opportunities in the world. $2.6 billion market for pork, $1.3 billion market for beef, $2.8 billion market through the TPP for grains and for barleys. This is a massive undertaking, a massive advantage for our local farmers, our local agricultural community here in Perth-Wellington. The farm community is happy with this deal, the farm community is supporting this deal, and I would hope that the remainder of the folks up here would support it as well.
Okay. And on that note, we'll move on to the next question here, and we'll start with Roger as well. Over the last 10 years, the federal debt has risen by over $100 billion to about $660 billion. Once in a position of fiscal balance, the federal government should immediately begin to pay down its debt and relieve its annual debt service charge, which now stands at $30 billion. How will your party begin to pay down that debt, Roger?
Well, I don't have a party, but we need to seek out savings within our existing budget. The Auditor General points out for us where the savings can be found. And as seems to be the annual routine anymore, there are a ton of those savings. We need to take the Auditor General's report and make sure that we are indeed going forward with the advice from that tax-funded office and follow up with the recommendations and enact them. This is pretty basic stuff, but it doesn't seem like the government is able to achieve these basic savings. I am especially disappointed with the fact that the Conservatives, who are supposedly the party that tries to balance the books, have failed so miserably over their last 9 years in office to fix some of these issues that the Auditor General points out. Frankly, what is the point of even paying the Auditor General's office with our tax dollars, primarily to seek out savings, if we never take that advice? It just doesn't make any sense. We can do better, folks.
Okay. We head down. Stephen, how will the Liberals pay down the debt?
Stephen Harper's created 2 deficits in Canada. He's added all this debt to our debt in his 8 consecutive deficits, but he's also created an infrastructure debt, a $160 billion infrastructure deficit. That is the amount of infrastructure that's lagging in cities like Stratford. So the question is, do you tackle the national debt or the infrastructure debt? And we're going to tackle the infrastructure debt first. Your property taxes go up every year. That's because the municipalities have to maintain the infrastructure here. If they don't, your infrastructure is going to lag. You don't have federal support from the federal government. That is why our social infrastructure spend of $20 billion over the next 10 years is so important for affordable housing, for seniors facilities, for childcare spaces. That is how you keep your property taxes down. After that, when the economy starts to grow, then you start to pay down your national debt. But with 8 consecutive deficits and 2 recessions, it's pretty hard to pay down your national debt.
Okay, thanks. John?
I always find it amusing to hear Mr. McCotter talk about Mr. Harper's deficits and then promise to keep spending $30 billion more in deficit spending over the next 3 years. When you want to pay down the debt, the first step is to stop spending more debt financing. It's as simple as that. So I'm proud that when our government was in power prior to the economic recession of 2008-2009, we paid down $38 billion in debt prior to those times. Then Minister Flaherty, late Minister Flaherty, during that tough economic time, made the difficult decision to do deficit financing and invest in the key priorities of Canadians at the time, which included infrastructure funding. Today, we are back in a balanced budget a year early. $1.9 billion surplus last year, $5.3 billion so far for this fiscal year for the first 5 months. That's important. We don't keep spending in deficit financing when we've returned to balance. We have the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. Let's keep it that way, and let's continue to maintain a balanced budget, pay down the debt.
Okay. Ethan, what would the NDP do to bring down the debt?
Sure, thanks, Eddie. So over the last 40 years, this country has racked up $660 billion in debt, and every penny was racked up by the 2 old parties as they sit here arguing over who has added more to it. I think the answer is that the Conservatives are responsible for 2/3 of it. The Liberals have the rest and are promising to add even more. Across Canada, provincially, the NDP actually has the best track record across the country of balancing the books, and our model is Tommy Douglas. That's who Tom Mulcair is going to model himself after, who brought in 20 straight balanced budgets while bringing in Medicare, paying off the debt he inherited from the Liberals, and also bringing in things like rural electrification. You can do both. It requires vision, it requires leadership, and it requires a fully costed plan, which the NDP has, endorsed by multiple economists and the Parliamentary Budget Office. Governing is about setting priorities, then adequately funding and sticking to them. We can do both. This is not an either or. You can advance a progressive agenda for Canada while doing it with cash in hand. Dumping debt onto the next generation is not responsible, nor is it a progressive thing to do.
Okay. We'll open up the floor. Would anybody like to say anything? John, we'll start with you, and then we'll come to Irma.
No, I get my first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry, Irma. My apologies. Yeah, Irma's got the last word here.
Our debt is immoral and unethical, and the decision makers have been irresponsible. The national debt clock indicates our debt's growing by almost $2,000 every minute that we are here tonight. The CHP agrees with you. Balance the budget and pay down the debt. Government spending has mortgaged our future. We'd mortgage the debt. The national debt must be repaid like a national mortgage. We'd make $4 billion payments monthly to eliminate the debt over 20 to 25 years. We're already spending $3 billion every month in interest payments, and just wait until interest rates go up. It's unsustainable and foolish to be spending $36 billion a year on interest payments. Couldn't we use that money better in healthcare?
Thank you, Irma. Let's open up for debate. John, we want to start with you.
Sure. So Mr. Rabidoux talks about the example of Tommy Douglas. I think that's a wise example because he doesn't mention the example of Premier Bob Rae here in Ontario, which I think is more worrisome if we take that example right here in Ontario. But let's be clear about where we stand. Even in the depths of the economic recession, we continue to maintain and increase transfer payments to the provinces. We contrast that with the 1990s when the Liberals were in power, when they were balancing the budgets. They cut billions of financing from post-secondary education and from healthcare. We've increased it, and we've done so while cutting taxes and while balancing the books this year and last year. That's the legacy we want to leave for our grandchildren and those who come after us.
Okay, thanks. Ethan, we'll get you in just a moment. Roger, I know you had your hand up first.
With regards to infrastructure, there's a lot of waste within the municipal budgets. We need to find savings in these budgets, and believe me, they are there. After sitting on a municipal council going over the budget line by line, I can assure you savings are there. This is the first place to start to improve our local infrastructure.
Okay. Ethan?
Thanks, Eddie. Listening to Mr. Nader talk about Mr. Harper's track record as a prudent fiscal manager reminds me of the Mark Twain quote, which says, "Give a man the reputation of an early riser, and that man can sleep till noon." And this is Mr. Harper's reputation in a nutshell. But Mr. Nader is right. As far as the Liberals in the 90s, they did indeed cut health care, post-secondary education. They raided the EI fund. And as far as balancing the books goes, that would be like if you're having issues and you just dumped your mortgage onto your neighbor, have you really balanced your books? Dumping onto the municipalities is what's causing the infrastructure deficit. It's what's causing most of the problems with regards to our municipalities, and the infrastructure deficit did not start with Mr. Harper, although he has definitely made it much worse. Governing is about setting priorities. What do we want to fund as a country? Let me give you a few examples. According to the International Monetary Fund, we spend $34 billion a year on fossil fuel subsidies. According to the government, the new Trans-Pacific Partnership, we're going to have to give $4.3 billion to dairy farmers over the next 15 years, a group of farmers that don't need subsidies right now under the current system of supply management, and we're going to have to bail out the auto sector to the tune of $1 billion to offset the effect of the TPP over the next 10 years. I just gave you $40 billion, and let me ask you folks, is that money well spent?
Ethan, thank you so much. The floor is open. Stephen, you wanted to respond?
Well, Mr. Nader talks out of both sides of his mouth. At one instance, he criticized deficit spending, and in the next instance, he talks about the $59 billion deficit they ran in 2009. We're in our second recession. We're the only G7 nation in recession. In the second quarter of this year, the U.S. economy grew by 4%. Ours declined by 1%. Mr. Nader will use words like, we increased spending. What he doesn't mention is when Mr. Harper came into power, 0.7% of GDP was spent on infrastructure. During Mr. Harper's time, it's gone down to 0.3%. So when you look at it as a percentage of GDP, it's cuts, cuts, cuts. As far as Mr. Rabidoux talking about the parliamentary budget officer reviewing his budget, it was reviewed and he called it Swiss cheese. So I'll leave it at that alone.
Okay. Irma. Hang on, folks. We'll let Irma respond to this one right now. Irma DeVries.
Okay, folks, you have to decide which of these parties wants to stimulate the economy with more government spending. Does your credit card work like that? They borrow money from the big banks, add it all to the debt, and try to find a new way to tax you. Not CHP Canada. We want to return to the Bank of Canada standard so that we fund infrastructure at 0% interest rates, just like Canada did after World War II. We'd control inflation by withdrawing that money from the circulation when it's repaid. Canadians will be left with new infrastructure and not new debt. We've got to stop borrowing from the big banks and making them rich. Pierre Trudeau was wrong when he stopped borrowing from the Bank of Canada in 1974, and instead he chose the big banks and compounded interest. How much interest did those big banks gain in the early 80s at 20% or more interest? Since then, our national debt has increased by 20% per year. We've got to stop this. They've compounded our future. We have to pay down the debt. CHP Canada is committed to paying down the debt.
Thank you, Irma. We'll give Irma the last word, and we're going to accept questions from the audience. And the first one is directed to Stephen. What is your party's platform for national health care coverage for children and seniors who are not covered by a private health care plan? This coverage needs to be included dental, eye, drugs, and medical services as well. Stephen?
1 minute? Well, I'll be really quick. The National Health Accord was signed in 2004 for 10 years. It provided for 6% increases to funding to health care. Stephen Harper did not re-sign that in 2014. He's cut it to 3% in 2017, and after that it'll be linked to economic growth and inflation, and we're not growing economically, so that means there's no increases or transfers. We will change that. Number 2, for seniors, they're struggling. We'll raise the guaranteed income supplement for seniors by 10%, low-income single seniors. This will help 900,000 women, 1.25 million Canadians. Finally, Paul Martin signed a national pharmacare plan with the provinces in 2004. In 2006, Stephen Harper walked away and reneged on that agreement. We will come back to the provinces, we'll start to talk to the provinces, and we'll bring in a bulk buying system where pharmacare drugs will be at a reasonable price to our seniors so they can afford to live on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. John, how would the party handle it?
Sure, a couple points here. First of all, we've been committed to increase health funding in Canada by at least 6% over the next 2 years, and following that by at least 3% or the rate of growth in the economy, whichever is higher. We've committed to that, and in practical terms, that means when we came to office in 2006, health spending in Canada was about $20 billion from the federal level. By 2019, that will be $40 billion. That's actual real dollars going straight to the provinces for healthcare funding in Canada. In terms of support for seniors and support for kids, we believe in getting the funding straight to parents, straight to seniors. So whether that be through pension splitting for seniors, whether that be through the new single seniors tax credit, whether that be through increased limits for TFSAs, which overwhelmingly tend to help those who are low-income seniors. And for families, guaranteeing and protecting income splitting for families, enhancing the universal child care benefit for kids under the age of 6, and expanding for the first time for kids from the age of 6 to 18.
Ethan, how would the NDP handle this situation?
Definitely. The NDP was the party that brought in universal Medicare, and we are the party that will restore it. Medicare funding is supposed to be 50-50. Right now it's about 80-20, and it reached its lowest point, which was about 8 cents in every healthcare dollar coming from the federal government in the late 90s under the Liberals. We have to slowly, you can't do it overnight, but get that escalator going back up, and you have to start with renegotiating with the provinces a new health accord that moves the situation in the right direction. We also need national strategies for dementia and for Alzheimer's to combat this, as it's going to become a bigger problem as the population ages. We also have a promise to bring in a mental health plan for youth who are struggling with mental health illnesses and what have you. And then, let's think here. And then as far as the seniors go, with regards to pensions, the NDP is going to increase the GIS by $400 million and reverse the conservative cuts to the OAS, along with dropping the retirement age back down to 65 from 67. That was an unnecessary move, and it's just a tax on workers.
Okay, thanks, Ethan. Irma DeVries, how would the Christian Heritage Party handle the healthcare situation right now?
Well, first of all, we believe in the Constitution of Canada, and that means that the provinces have their jurisdiction, and we, as the federal party, has our jurisdiction. Healthcare is the purview of the provinces, and it's up to the provinces to decide how to spend that healthcare dollar. Saying that, though, CHP has long said that the current 14% that is being given from the federal government to the provinces should be raised to 25%, because we'd like to see a lot more people have the health care that they need. One part of our platform does say that we do support some aspects of privatization. Right now, you can get an ultrasound at the hospital or at a private clinic. That's fine. There's certain things that could very well be privatized without worrying about our healthcare dollar and our care for ourselves.
Thanks, Irma. Roger, we'll give you the last word on this.
Okay, thanks. I would not be supportive of any of the political parties that might attempt to lessen the funding of the truly needy. Whoever ends up becoming Prime Minister could expect to get an earful from me if they ever consider downgrading current funding levels. There is a lot of waste currently in the healthcare system. Care is not getting to those who really need it. In-home healthcare is one of those examples. We should be more interested in keeping people in their homes, and more support is definitely needed.
Thank you. Stephen?
I just wanted to touch on what Mr. Nader said there. He said to help low-income seniors, we're going to double the TFSA limit. So for all those low-income seniors out there that have $11,000 in cash sitting around at the end of the year, you're going to benefit in a big way.
Okay. We'll let John respond to this one. John Nader?
Well, let's look at the facts. Those who max out their TFSAs, over 60% of those are low income. That's the facts. Those are the Department of Finance numbers. So let's look at that. Second of all, the TFSA is tax-free. So low-income seniors can transfer funding each year that they may have in interest-bearing accounts that is currently being taxed. It can be transferred to the tax-free savings account and let them keep more of it in their pockets. Second, we've also changed the rules for the RIF to allow seniors to keep their income longer, spread it out over a longer period of time, and not have the tax back to them at a higher rate.
Okay, thanks. We got a question for Ethan right now. Ethan, Mr. Rabidoux, recently you and Mr. McCotter extolled the virtues of supply management. What would you do to reduce the cost and barriers for entry, it looks like, for those who want to go into the dairy agriculture in general and other businesses as well?
Absolutely. So thank you for the question. This is a vitally important matter. We have about 360 dairy farms in Perth-Wellington, pardon me. I think that's actually the most dairy farms for any county throughout Canada. This is a vitally important sector, and we absolutely do support supply management. Reducing barriers for entry into agriculture is a huge issue that can be done through certain things like business risk management programs, which the farmers are asking for, and working with agriculture organizations to develop grassroots solutions to this issue. But what's not going to encourage young people to get into farming is uncertainty, instability, and let's just say it, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which, is talking about $4.3 billion in bailouts over the next 15 years, but that's there to offset the losses that the farmers are going to incur because of this trade agreement. You're not going to get young people into farming with that sort of atmosphere.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Irma, the agriculture industry, how would you help work it?
We've been dairy farmers for 24 years, and then we decided that our knees were sore and we quit. But supply management, there are some barriers to it. But I don't believe that we need a big government solution to fix this problem, because if the government gets involved, it's going to cost you. We believe in your ability to be innovative and to find new ways to do that. We helped a farmer get into farming. Why can't somebody else do that? Do some succession planning with some senior farmers that you know in the community. They don't need to be related, and figure out a way that you can get into farming. It's not impossible. Our son is farming. He's a young farmer. He got into it without Daddy's help, even though Daddy helped somebody else. So let's figure that one out.
Roger, you've seen a lot of this from your years in that. What would you do to help with the agriculture industry?
Yes, I grew up in that environment on a dairy farm, and supply management definitely has a place in this country. And I would advocate to protect that to the best of my ability as your MP in Ottawa. But I do have to say that there's a change afloat in the worldwide environment. The price of land here is relatively cheap as opposed to the worldwide price of land. And I do believe that farms are going to continue to get bigger as time goes along. So it's going to be a real challenge to continue to protect that.
Because I've been hearing like 24,000 an acre in some cases? It's incredibly high.
Yes, but if you look at Europe, the situation over there is even quite a bit higher than that.
Stephen, how would you help out with this one?
You know, supply management's a system that works. Trade is very, very important. Liberal Party is very much in favor of trade. Unfortunately, this TPP was negotiated in secrecy. We don't have enough details on it right now to know how much of an attack our supply managed farmers are under. The Liberal Party is going to wait for more information on it to see just how much of an attack they're under. And We look forward when we form government to having an open and transparent debate in Parliament about the TPP and supply management. But for now, they're certainly needing a louder voice, in my opinion, someone that's going to speak up. I don't know what our local representative did on this front to make sure that our farmers were protected. I know it was the Prime Minister and he alone, and elected officials had no information on it. So I think there needs to be more transparency.
Okay. John, we'll ask you that question because we've got a lot of dairy farmers.
So to answer the question that was actually asked, how do you encourage new people to get into supply management? Well, first of all, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You need to work with the industry. So the Dairy Farmers of Ontario do have a new entrance program of how they encourage new young farmers to get into a supply managed commodity like dairy. So what we need to do as a government is work with the DFO as we've done so over the past number of years. You know, it's unfortunate that Mr. Rabidoux refers to a bailout for dairy farmers. It's no such thing. Dairy Farmers of Canada have been very clear on that. They've clearly stated, Wally Smith, president of Dairy Farmers of Canada, said, you know, supply management is here to stay. Supply management has been protected. It's not a bailout, it's compensation going forward, and it's not a subsidy.
We'll open up the floor.
Dairy Farmers of Canada.
We'll open the floor then. Would anybody like to respond to that? Ethan?
Well, if it walks like a bailout and quacks like a bailout, or moves like a bailout, it's a bailout. And the important point is that it's not needed right now. It's that right now farmers don't need, dairy farmers, pardon me, don't need any subsidies because the current system, as Mr. McCotter says, works. This is a solution in search of a problem. And the Conservatives have indeed created a problem in agriculture with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. $4.3 billion over 15 years, whereas under the status quo, it would be nothing, and dairy farmers could keep doing what they do best, producing the best milk in the world right here at home.
Stephen?
The one high-level thing that I thought about was, where's Mr. Harper getting this $5 billion? What's he going to cut? Because he has to balance the budget. So that's a question I think he needs to answer.
Okay. Irma, what have you seen in your travels?
I hear people talking about the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership, and I think there's going to be a lot of work over the next 10 years in protecting our industry for supply management. When NAFTA came in, there was a lot of complaints. There were demonstrations at Parliament Hill. There were 40,000 farmers there. But you know, we still have supply management today, and that was the worry back then. I think we've got some good industry people that are going to fight really hard to keep supply management. Let's not worry too much about the future. Let's not borrow from tomorrow what we don't need to worry about. It'll work out. Jerry Ritz will stand up for supply management.
It's still early. It's only a few days old.
I know it's very early in, and to be quite frank, I need some more time to study this, but it sounds to me like $4.3 billion for the dairy farmers for only losing 3.25% of the market is quite a chunk of change for us as Canadians to throw in.
Okay. We'll give you the last word here.
Yeah, just very quickly, it's not just dairy, it's a whole industry approach, and includes such things as financing for processors to use new and innovative methods in the processing industry. It's also got financing for marketing and branding to encourage Canadians to support their local farmers, support the milk that's on the shelf that has the milk project dogs that have the little blue cow on them, support local Canadian things. At the end of the day, over 90% of all dairy products, all supply managed commodities on the grocery shelf will still be Canadian made and Canadian produced.
What I'm hearing is, will competition prevail? Is that what it comes down to? Let competition rule then.
At the end of the day, you know, there's still going to be a massive market in Canada for the supply managed commodities, over 90%. And at the end of the day, you know, when you go to that grocery shelf, you're going to pick the Canadian made product, Canadian produced product. And I think most Canadians will do that. Sorry?
Why does it need compensation?
Why do they need compensation?
Well, there's three components to that. One is the income stabilization, if there is a change. The other is protection of the quota prices. You may not see a change in the quota prices going forward.
Are we doing for time? Are we okay to keep this going? Okay, Ethan?
Okay. 2 points. Unless it's a birthday party, surprises don't tend to be kept from you because they think you're going to love it. All right. This trade agreement was negotiated in secret during an election campaign, and we've only seen the tip of the iceberg yet. And what we've seen so far isn't impressing me very much. I don't know about you guys. Under the Conservative approach to agriculture so far, we've lost 30,000 family farms over the last 10 years, and farm debt has come up 70%. The Conservative approach is not working. The Trans-Pacific Partnership puts that approach on steroids.
Roger, I know you wanted to say something.
I'm all for Canadian products of every kind, but the fact of the matter is that not everybody can afford those, and they have to make real everyday decisions about whether or not they can afford to buy that, and if there's something less costly available, then they have to take that. And so that's just a fact of life.
It's easier said than, well, Irma, we'll give you a word here.
Okay, the Christian Heritage Party would like to not see the government have to bail out each sector. We would like to see 1% of the GST go to be charged at the consumer level, and then that goes to a pot that each sector by sector gets to manage. So the pork and the beef and the dairy, et cetera, will each have their own sector, and there'll be funds in that pot. And then when there's an issue such as BSE or avian flu or whatever, a downturn in the market, you can go to that producer board, and that producer board will be able to send that money out to the producers in that community, rather than waiting for some big government program that will make it, that loses a lot of the money in the bureaucracy. We want to see it managed locally by the producers themselves.
So we always like to encourage you to shop the local market, you know, on Saturday mornings. Irma, we've got this question for you. Do you have any plans to implement incentives for energy efficient renovations to residential homes?
We would support building onto homes to look after the elderly, so a grandpa suite. But no, we have not got anything in our platform that says we're going to throw so many $1 million at you to renovate your home. We'd like to see you take responsibility for your own needs.
Okay. Roger, how would you handle that? Energy is going to be, we're coming to the winter months, the furnaces are starting to go on.
I would share Irma's comment there. I believe people need to stand on their own 2 feet in this regard. But what I would like to bring out is the glaring lack of affordable housing in Perth-Wellington, and what is going to be done about that. There's people that are employers that are looking to hire in this riding, and they can't find anybody to work because those people have no place to live here that they can afford. So we're shipping people in from London or Kitchener or wherever, but we need to deal with affordable housing first.
Stephen McCotter, how would the Liberals handle the energy situation?
No, I think the boutique tax credit is more Mr. Nader's party style. We have a more holistic approach. We think that the economy and the environment go hand in hand. We have a broad-based investment strategy. We would invest $100 million more each year in clean technology producers to encourage that. And we'd further invest $200 million more to support innovation in the use of clean technology in our natural resources sector. So,
again, it's unfortunate that Mr. McCotter would refer to home ownership as a boutique issue. I think home ownership is something we need to encourage, something we need to work on, and something I'd like to see more of in Canada is more home ownership. To that end, I'm proud that our government will be introducing a permanent home renovation tax credit that Canadian families can take advantage of. The home is probably the biggest financial investment that any of us will ever make. So being able to invest in making renovations to increase the value in your home is something that we're strongly encouraging people to do. Second thing is the home accessibility tax credit for seniors and those with disabilities to be able to take advantage of that program to make necessary adjustments to their home so they can stay in their home longer, especially in their senior years.
Okay. Before we open the floor, Ethan?
Unless I missed the crux of the question, we're talking about transitioning to a green economy. That seems to be the heart of the question here.
Renovations to residential homes. So any plans to implement incentives for energy efficient renovations?
As far as energy efficiency goes, and in general having to do with the environment or and the economy, it is, yes, what Mr. McCotter said is true. It's not either or. We can definitely do both, transition to the green economy and clean up the environment at the same time. Tom Mulcair was Environment Minister in Quebec for 3 years, resigned when Mr. Charest tried to allow condo developers on protected land, and every year that Mr. Mulcair was the Environment Minister, the carbon emissions went down. So Tom Mulcair has got the leadership and the experience to actually tackle the environment on every front. The NDP believes we must start weaning ourselves off of fossil fuel subsidies and fossil fuel reliance. We do support a cap and trade system. That was a system that was used to tackle the acid rain issue in the late 80s and early 90s. It worked then, it can work now.
Okay, we'll open up the floor here. Stephen?
Mr. Nader brought up the home renovation tax credit. That was brought in 2009 after the global recession. He refers to it as permanent. Well, it's gone now, and now they're bringing it back in an election year. Mr. Harper was asked about it on August 8th. He said 2 things. We'll bring it in if it's affordable and sustainable. e.g. if we're able to balance our budget. If we're not, it's not coming in. Number two, when asked when he brought in, he said the midterm of our mandate. So I think that means about 2017, 2018. So it's yet another one of these promises that if you parse the language that Mr. Harper uses, you're never going to see it.
John?
The home renovation tax credit will be implemented January 1st of this coming year. That's a fact. The previous home renovation tax credit was introduced during the global economic downturn as part of our stimulus package to help homeowners. 2 points about that. First of all, it helped homeowners. It decreased the burden of making change to their home. Second, it actually helped the industry as well. It helped to root out a lot of the underground economy at the time, and will do so again with the new one, because you can only use accredited tradespeople, people who are working above board for their services. So it's a dual purpose approach. It's good for the economy and good for local home builders and home renovators.
Ethan Rabidoux, you wanted to respond?
Thank you. With regards to home ownership, it is indeed important, but home affordability is relative to the cost of living. Okay? The United Way Perth-Huron released the cost of living report earlier this year. They pegged a living wage in Perth County at $16.47 an hour. That assumes renting, not buying. That assumes no long-term saving. That's a family of 4 with 1 child in childcare, 1 child in elementary school. And that's both parents working full-time. If we don't start dealing with the cost of living and stagnating wages and jobs, good jobs leaving the area, and workers are having to use food banks, I got sad news for you. They're not buying homes either.
Roger, did you want to mention something?
I have to tell you, it's almost comical listening to these party candidates promise you how they're going to better deliver this or that program, or how are they going to develop a new program to serve you better or send you some free money. A classic recent example would be the Conservative Harper government's announcement about the child tax credit. Parents with children all received a large check in the mail. Interestingly, just before the election call, only to find out that most of them will have to pay the money back next spring on the income tax returns. This is the kind of programs political parties dream up, folks.
Well, Irma, and then we'll get to John. Irma?
I'd like to comment about the cap and trade and the carbon taxes that 2 parties are offering to you as a way to take care of the environment. Unfortunately, we don't believe that that is a real crisis. We believe that CO2, which you breathe out, is essential for life and plants' life. Plants do better when they put CO2 into a greenhouse. There's fields that say that there's carbon aided in the fields. Farmers use carbon. So we don't believe that carbon taxes are good. We believe carbon taxes will actually cripple industry, because every aspect of transportation and manufacturing is going to cost more. We don't believe that. Solar activity changes the Earth's climate, not the Earth changing the climate. We're not creating global warming. We believe that this kind of manipulation is not true, and we'd like you to look at global warming hoax and global cooling, because we're actually in a cooling cycle. Now, we want to protect the environment. We want to stop nitrous oxide, sulfur dioxide, and we'd like to stop the volatile chemicals that are being put into the atmosphere. That's where we're going to save the environment, not worrying about CO2 and water.
Okay. John Nader, you wanted to respond to that.
Sure, just on the universal child care benefit, I will never apologize for putting more money in the pockets of moms and dads. Those are the people who know the best way to raise their kids and raise their families, and I will never apologize for supporting our families and putting more money in their pockets. On the issue of the taxation of it, it's taxed at the lower income earner in the family, and if it's a single income family, it is taxed at the rate of one of the children. So the amount of taxation that for low income and middle income families is minuscule at the end of the day. We're talking about tens of dollars in most cases.
Okay, we'll go to Ethan, and then we'll give Stephen the last word. Ethan, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. As far as helping families go, the NDP believes in universal child care. This is something that both parties have they've promised child care spaces every election since 1993. They've never delivered. The NDP will come through. As for climate change, it's real, and we're causing it. We better get used to that.
Okay. Time's up on this one. We'll get to the next question here. We'll open that up in just a moment then, Stephen. We're running out of time here. This question is directed for Roger Fewer. Universal pharmacy care would reduce the cost of prescription medication by millions. What would you do if elected?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yep. universal pharmacy care, I'm pretty sure that's what it says here, would reduce the cost of prescription medications by millions. What would you do if you were involved in this one, if you were elected and sent to Ottawa?
Well, that's a big question, and to be honest with you, I haven't personally done a lot of research on that particular subject, and I haven't had a lot of support behind me as far as some of these questions that are in a lot of detail like that. So I'll have to say that I will definitely look into that and do my best to act on Perth-Wellington's best interest.
We'll throw it down to Stephen.
Sure. Well, I think I touched on it earlier. It's not an overly complex problem to solve. If you buy in bulk, you get a cheaper price. Mr. Harper walked away from the pharmacare plan that we had negotiated with the provinces. This is just yet another example of how Ontario is suffering because Mr. Harper refuses to work with the provinces. He's met once with all the premiers in 10 years for a dinner. If the federal government is not talking to the provincial government, we are not going to get solutions. So Justin Trudeau will sit down with the provinces within 90 days of being elected, and he will develop a bulk pharmacare purchasing system.
Thanks, Stephen. John Nader.
Well, first of all, Ontario's suffering because of the leadership of the Ontario Liberals. Look at the skyrocketing energy rates. Look at the ORPP.
Give him a chance.
But to the question at hand, in terms of pharmacy, this does fall primarily under the jurisdiction of the provinces. And when you see more barriers between provinces in terms of trade and in terms of working together, that's more of a challenge when there's between provinces than internationally. So the provinces really need to work together to come up with a solution at the provincial level.
Okay. We'll go down, Ethan.
Yeah, the NDP favors the introduction of a national pharmacare strategy. Mr. McCotter laid out the bulk purchasing. We're in favor of that. It does have to be done while negotiating with the provinces, and we do need a federal government that meets with the provinces. I just want to address one thing Mr. Nader said about Ontario suffering. We are because the current government and the government before that are privatizing Hydro One. This jeopardizes 1 in 5 businesses, and it shows us what happens when ideology replaces common sense. Hydro One belongs in public hands, plain and simple. Our hydro rates are going up not because of some mystical force that we can't explain and have no control over. In Quebec, they pay less than half than we do because they kept it in public hands, and this is the price we pay for this neoliberal agenda.
Okay. Irma? Irma DeVries, ladies and gentlemen.
The Christian Heritage Party would want to examine the connection between all the pharmaceutical companies and Health Canada. We believe that the price of pharmaceuticals, your prescription drugs, is growing and it's unfair. There's something going on between those two. We'd like to see that connection broken and that we have true science-based studies when it comes to pharmaceuticals and healthcare and whatever ways we can improve your health. We also want to offer $1,000 a month family care if one parent stays home either to look after their children, to look after an elderly person, a disabled person. We'd like you to be able to do that in your own home. We support adding grandpa suites to your existing house so that you can look after your lovely relative close to home. And we feel that that is much better for our society and will reduce the cost of health care because we'll be looking after each other.
Thank you, Irma. Let's open the floor here and just talk a bit. We'll throw it out there to see what you would do. The high cost of not only prescription, but health care for that matter.
Well, people haven't had a good raise in 10 years. The jobs out there, especially in Stratford, St. Mary's and surrounding area, they're becoming part-time, they're low-paying, they're precarious. I remember 10 years ago, people were making $80,000, $90,000 a year working at good manufacturing jobs around here. So if we don't do something to kickstart the economy, this is going to continue on. And that's why, we talked about the child care benefit. Mr. Rabidoux and Mr. Nader said they're in favor of the universal child care benefit. So if you make $1 million on your tax return, you get the same check as the single mom that's making $18,000 a year. When we change it to an income-tested system, that will lift 315,000 children out of poverty. So we're going to stop sending checks to millionaires like my two friends are in support of. So you got to figure out ways to put money in the pockets of the families that need it.
Okay, thank you. Ethan Rabidoux, and then we'll go to John.
Sure. With regards to healthcare, the sectors that are growing the fastest in cost are the ones that are being privatized. Privatization does not reduce the cost of healthcare, it increases it. We have to keep it in public hands, which requires federal leadership working with the provinces. As far as Mr. McCotter talking about all the progressive ideas Liberals have, well, the Liberals have a tendency of campaigning to the left and tacking to the right. We've seen this time after time. We're seeing it in Ontario right now. I mentioned the privatization of Hydro One, and you will see that again. Einstein defined it. Einstein defined insanity as doing the same thing repeatedly and expecting a different result. If you want a truly progressive government, if you want a clean house in Ottawa, you got to stop sending the same parties and vote in the NDP.
Okay. John Nader.
So first of all, to address this old canard that Mr. McCotter seems to bring up from time to time about middle income, the fact of the matter is the median income in Canada since 2006 when we came to office was $810 a week in 2006. Today, it's after adjusting for inflation, it's $867. So we do have a strong, vibrant middle class in Canada, and we need to have a strong economy to encourage that growth in the middle class. On the subject of cost of healthcare, one of the big things we need to focus on is something that at the federal level we can play through research and development is the innovation in the healthcare, innovation financing through research and development. Absolutely essential to find new technologies, new ways of doing things to reduce the cost of healthcare, and that's done through research.
Okay. Ethan, you wanted to respond to that?
We can't have research unless we unmuzzle the scientists and stop scaring the hell out of them. All right? And we also have to properly fund them so we can move ahead and get back on the cutting edge of information technology and knowledge in this country. And while we're at it, why don't we bring back the long-form census?
Okay, John, are we losing our scientists or what?
First of all, nonsense. Last year alone, more than 4,000 academic articles in peer-reviewed journals in Canada and the United States were published by government scientists. Our scientists are undertaking world-class research, cutting-edge research, and it's out there in widely read academic journals where the academic and the scientific community share ideas and share new innovations going forward. That's where we have this important discussion going forward on how we innovate in all sectors of the economy, but healthcare is one of them.
Okay. We got about a minute left. Anybody want to respond? Stephen? Then we'll come to Irma.
This is my sixth debate where I've sat and listened to my two opponents say they should get elected because of some other government at some other level. So I'm used to it in that regard. As far as science, anybody out there that thinks that Stephen Harper is in favor of science and decisions made on fact, they're living in a different planet than I am. We're committed on election, restoring the research funding that Mr. Harper has cut. We'll bring in a chief science officer who'll be independent. We'll put an online portal where you can access government research, and we'll revoke all the rules and regulations that Harper has brought in to prevent scientists from talking.
Good. Okay, we've got less than a minute left, Irma, if you can be quick about this one.
When it comes to research, we should be able to do any kind of scientific research and get that out to our world. The problem is that there's so much political correctness on campuses and in research places that the actual research doesn't get out. The whole global warming idea, everybody thinks that there's global warming, and it's so easy to say, dismiss those that say that they deny it. But have you examined the research? And I challenge you to do that. I will show you two instances where I'll bet you don't know that there's an abortion, breast cancer link, and there's a pill and breast cancer link. And I don't think you know about most of that because the research has been suppressed. Every time there's research saying that it's true, somebody from Planned Parenthood will prove that it's not.
And we'll hold on that because we can open up a whole can of worms with that one.
That's right.
Well, and we've only got an extra 45 minutes or so here. This question is directed to John. What is your part? And this is, as we were talking about with healthcare and especially now with seniors and that. The number of seniors is growing, John, who have paid taxes for many decades, now find that their well-earned pensions are barely adequate. What, are you hearing that question a lot?
Great question. Recently, just last week, we found out that there are now more seniors in Canada, those over the age of 65, than those under the age of 14. This is the first time in history this has actually happened. So it is a growing demographic shift, and we see this in Canada. A couple things that I think are important from a federal perspective that we have to do. First of all, continue to maintain pension splitting for seniors. On top of that, those who are single seniors can't take advantage of pension splitting. So we are proposing to introduce, if we're re-elected, a single seniors tax credit to effectively balance out those seniors who don't have a spouse to split their pension earnings with. We've introduced changes in the last budget to the RIFs, allowing seniors to withdraw their funds from that at a longer period of time, so they're not taxed back and clawed back as much as possible. We're providing other savings tools, including the TFSAs, to allow you to put your hard-earned earnings in there so they're not taxed back by the government in your golden years.
Thank you, John. Ethan Rabidoux, you wanted to respond?
Yes, please. So the NDP's policies on this one, I mentioned them a bit earlier, but I'll go through them again. So we're going to increase the GIS by $400 million, which will automatically lift hundreds of thousands of seniors in this country out of poverty. We're going to reverse the conservative cuts to the OAS that were made in 2012, and we're going to drop the retirement age back down to 65 from 67 while protecting workplace pensions. Other things I mentioned, bringing in a national pharmacare strategy, which will help with prescription drugs. That'll help everyone, but it will also help seniors as well. So there's a number of ways we can help seniors.
Yeah. Irma, has this been coming up with you? Have you been hearing more about the plight of seniors and pensions?
Definitely. And we find that it's a real problem because there's not enough children for every worker that's retiring right now. So we would like to gradually replace this whole retirement CPP pension plan with something called a personal security income account. So starting with your first job, 10% of your income will be deposited into this PISA, 5% from your employer and 5% from you, and this will be invested in your name. It won't go into this big, huge government coffer that spends it elsewhere. It'll stay in your name, same as the tax-free savings account. Then if you're ill or unemployed, you can withdraw 15%. After that, government programs will take care of you. This Made in Canada program was adopted by Chile 25 years ago, and those that chose to participate are quite wealthy today because there's a huge investment pool in Chile to be used for infrastructure.
Thanks. Roger?
Thank you. Well, the cost of everything is skyrocketing to the point that frankly, I really no longer tend to believe the annual inflation rates anymore. It's just so hard when you go grocery shopping or looking for anything of your basic needs. But a big factor of that is because we pay so much tax. Everything we buy, there's just so much tax involved with it. So the government gets their money or their hands into your money and they take it, and then sometimes they give it back. Mostly they don't. But certainly we need to look after the elderly better than we're doing now.
Stephen, the plight of the seniors and our pension plan, what's going to happen?
Well, as far as seniors, I've touched on the GIS going up for the low-income seniors. Part of our infrastructure spend that we're committed to is seniors facilities and home care. And I know, being a municipal councillor, that having a seniors facility is an important issue. I've traveled around the riding and I see people from Cambridge, Toronto that have come to this area because seniors facilities are not available. So that's an important part of it. Mr. Nader always invokes the memory of Jim Flaherty, but Jim Flaherty was in favor of increasing the CPP and enhancing the CPP. Mr. Nader is against the Ontario pension plan, but that's being brought in because Mr. Harper refuses to enhance the CPP. Justin Trudeau will sit down with all the provinces and work to enhance CPP, not only for the people that can afford to contribute a bit more, but everybody, because seniors deserve dignity when they retire.
Let's open up the floor here. Roger, you wanted to start things off for us?
But the elderly will certainly not be able to access the new Ontario pension plan. So I just want everybody to understand that. That's just starting now, and the people who are going to need it, who are the elderly now, will not be able to access that.
Okay. Ethan, you had something you wanted to say?
Well, sure, I'll add to it as far as enabling workers to save right now, which is where all the NDP's policies feed into that. I mentioned the United Way Perth-Huron's living wage report earlier this year. One of the major costs that families face is childcare. I think they peg it at about $1,200 a month, and that's probably being generous in some cases where it's as high as $2,000 a month. If we can alleviate burdens like that, then that frees up disposable income for families to either buy houses or squirrel away for retirement. We have to reduce the cost of living, get good jobs here that boost up wages. This is all connected. The NDP has policies for seniors specifically, but we have to take a holistic approach to this.
Okay. With that in mind, too, and I'll just show of hands, because let's face it, Stratford is a grain community. Are you concerned about your pension? Most people are, and that's one thing that we want to look at is how are we going to be able to afford to retire down the road? And we'll open up the floor for that even, too. John?
So from the CPP side of things, it's good to see that the CPP is fully funded for 75 years, the CPP side of things. That means my 14-month-old daughter can retire in 64 years from now and still expect to receive at least 10 years of CPP income. So the CPP retirement income is fully funded and fully costed. What our party has proposed and what we want to look at in conjunction with provinces is a supplement to the CPP, a voluntary supplement where employers and employees can opt into a CPP managed plan to plan for their retirement savings. What we're not in favor of is effectively an ORPP tax where anyone over the age of 25 will never be able to collect the full benefits of that program when they turn 65. And the side of that is that those who will in the future perhaps collect some amount from the ORPP, it'll be instantly clawed back by the GIS because the way the Ontario government has set it up. So that's something we would not want to see happen, because what's happening is the lowest income seniors are all of a sudden being worse off because it's being clawed back right away through the GIS.
With that in mind, you know, how many of us think, are we going to be working on the Freedom 85 package? Stephen, are we going to be able to retire at a decent age?
Well, that's, you know, I think people out there see through the rhetoric and they know that they're struggling. Seniors are struggling. Everybody's struggling. They have less money in their pocket. There wouldn't be an ORPP if Stephen Harper didn't, quote, take great pleasure in not working with the Ontario premiers. So unfortunately, this is why we need to get rid of Stephen Harper and bring someone in that's willing to look at Canada as a whole, not just as Alberta being the only province. And, you know, the rollback is 67 to 65. Mr. Harper raised the eligibility to 67. So people that are, you know, 53, 54 years old, now they know they got to wait an extra 2 years before they're eligible to collect their pension. We will reverse that back to 65 immediately.
Okay. Ethan, you wanted to respond?
Sure. Mr. Harper's not looking at Alberta much, very more with Rachel Notley in charge of it now. But he is. But he is looking at oil and gas a lot, and so I'll give Mr. McCotter that point. I just wanted to make one last point clear about this, which is that the NDP will preserve income splitting for senior citizens. That's one more point I just wanted to get out there to make sure there's no confusion or misdirection.
And I'm going to take 1 second too. I know Mr. Nader's been going around the riding saying Liberals cancel income splitting for seniors. That is not true either. We will cancel income splitting for families so that this tax break for the rich that they've given will be passed along to low-income people trying to get by.
Okay, we got a little bit of time left. The Christian Heritage Party, how would you handle with the pensions?
We'd like to support compassionate care for the elderly and for the disabled. And one thing when you're talking about seniors, and we have to remember that the Supreme Court just struck down the euthanasia law. And that's a real problem, because if you look at what's happening in Europe, there's a duty to die in some of those countries. And I don't want to see that happening to you. I'd like to stand up in Parliament and say, use the notwithstanding clause to avoid euthanasia and assisted suicide, because we need to provide palliative care, we need to provide pain management, we need to train our doctors far better in pain management, we need to offer much more home care to families, we need to look after our seniors. They've done an awful lot for our country, they built this country, we need to take care of our seniors and our veterans. So if we could do anything, we'd like to protect your way of life and provide for you in whatever way we can.
Okay, thank you. Roger, we'll give you the last word here.
First rule of retirement, in my opinion, is do whatever you can to avoid incurring debt, avoid incurring more debt. Those interest payments are killers at the end of the day. I mean, just look at us as a nation. This year we're paying $30 billion in interest payments. Just think what we could do with that for the elderly.
Okay, we'll hold with you, Roger, as well. This question is directed to Roger Fuhrer. What is your plan for transfer payments to the provinces, especially Ontario, over the next 4 years?
Well, absolutely. Healthcare is a big one. Education is a big one. Those two are must-dos, and along with transportation. And I mean, we just have to continue to follow the path that we're on. Basically, the blueprint is there, the way I see it. But we don't need to incur a whole bunch more debt in order to deliver these services. So the transfer payments should carry on to the provinces, and they should be put out fairly based on population and any extreme remote needs that might be out there.
Transfer payments have been a contentious issue. Stephen?
Sure. Well, you know, I hate to pick on Mr. Harper, but this is another example of little sneaky tricks he does. Healthcare is a great example. He switched to a per capita based funding system. so that whoever's population grows up by the greatest, they get the biggest increase in transfer payments for healthcare. Well, what province had the biggest population boom? Alberta. Why? Because lots of young people are moving there for jobs. Who doesn't need the healthcare system? Young people. Who suffers? Ontario. So as far as transfer payments, we're going to change it, healthcare, I'll just use an example, to a needs-based analysis. We will identify where the need is for healthcare spending, and we will transfer the money in that fashion. As far as our infrastructure transfers, those will be determined just like the gas tax in Ontario. They will flow to the municipalities, so your elected officials that you vote for municipally will decide where your infrastructure money goes. It won't be Harper saying you're going to pave this road and put a blue sign up. It'll be you saying we need affordable housing, we need a seniors facility, we need a child care facility.
Okay.
It'll be your municipal people that'll make those decisions.
We'll hold you off on that. And John Nader, the transfer payments.
You know, it's funny, I served 4 years on municipal council, and I don't remember Prime Minister Harper ever telling me which road to pave. That was a decision we made on West Perth Council, and we made some great investments there with the support of our provincial and federal governments, more so from the federal governments, unfortunately, because the Kathleen Wynne government is unfortunately bankrupt. But we have committed to maintaining and enhancing our transfers through both the Canada Health Transfer, which will increase to the highest level in Canadian history, again, year after year, to over $40 billion by 2019. We're going to maintain increase in the Canada Social Transfer, and we're going to maintain the equalization program. As we know, Ontario is now a have-not province, and they've now received multi-billion-dollar payments through the equalization program to the province of Ontario to bring them up to a certain level. And I'm proud that we've increased transfers every year since we've been in office, while still cutting taxes for Canadian families.
Okay. With that in mind, too, transfer payments, I've heard your party talking a lot about that as well.
Yeah, it's a huge issue, and this comes down to having a federal government that meets with the premiers and actually hammers out national strategies on everything, whether it's healthcare, childcare, infrastructure, you name it. We need to move the federal government's portion back up. Right now, it's inadequate as it is today, and it's going to start to go down under the current funding model laid out by the Harper government. We need to reverse that, but that has to be done working with the provinces. As far as infrastructure goes, yeah, the NDP has got a long-term plan out over 20 years to roll out the infrastructure funding and to put a dent in that $172 billion infrastructure deficit that we have. The trend over the last few years has been for the governments to fund short-term, sexy projects they can announce one year, cut the ribbon on the next, and then brag, look what we've done. We need to take a long-term approach to really make a dent in this issue.
Irma?
The Christian Heritage Party has a three-step program for balancing the federal and provincial powers and economic and political strength. First, we must respect the constitutional division of powers. The federal government should not interfere on what is the responsibility of the province, nor should the federal government say to the provinces, well, we'll give you money if you spend it on. That's not right. Second, we want to reform and strengthen the Senate by letting the provinces appoint or elect senators as they choose, and seat the senators by region, not by party affiliation. And third, we believe that Ottawa and the provinces, through First Ministers' conferences, must negotiate a uniform basic level per capita funding to equalize access right across Canada. The equalization payments must be made more fair. And I'm sad to say that Ontario is a have-not province. How did that happen?
Okay, we'll leave it at that. And Roger, I know you wanted to comment on that.
Well, just back to this gas tax for infrastructure thing, it never ceases to amaze me. I mean, Mr. Nader says that we're going to take all this gas tax money and give it to infrastructure. But where did this money come from in the first place? I mean, we paid it at the pumps, right? And so here we're paying the money in, and then you're walking away with like a hero saying that, we're giving it back to you now. I mean, the government just runs money through their fingers all the time, and for what?
John, we'll let you respond to that.
I've served on municipal council, and I speak with different mayors, different wardens on a regular basis, and one thing they've consistently told me is how much they appreciate and support the continuation and the enhancements of the gas tax fund, because it allows them the flexibility to choose which projects they focus on at the municipal level. I was proud to serve on a municipal council for 4 years. I know the city of Stratford receives a significant amount of funding through the gas tax fund, where they can undertake the projects that they see fit. I know just last year they shifted some of their priorities around, so they were able to do the Mornington Street work and complete it within the following year. So it does provide that flexibility to Canadians and to Canadian municipalities.
Would the Liberals be doing anything for this area? Because that's one thing, you know, we need to hear about is what the individual parties will do for these ridings.
I'm glad you asked that. I'm picking up on what Mr. Rabidoux said. Mr. Mulcair's promises not only are contingent on balanced budget, then they'll come through, but the timing is very important. They've made a child care commitment, but what they don't mention is it's going to take 8 years to implement it. That's 2 4-year election terms. And the province has to pay for 40% of the bill. Their transit commitment is in 20 years, just like he just said there. The key to our infrastructure spend is, number one, it is borrowed money at 1%. Number two, it's going to flow next year. $60 billion, but $20 billion will flow in the first 4 years. Divide that into 338 ridings, and you'll see how much money is going to come to this riding. And it won't be me or Justin Trudeau telling you what you have to spend it on. It'll be the people that you put in your next council.
Okay. Ethan, you wanted to respond to that?
Yes, if you'd been sitting in this room in 1993, you'd have heard the exact same spiel from the Liberals about childcare and about the environment and about infrastructure, okay? This is the thing. I mean, yes, we're going to roll it out over 8 years because that's the responsible thing to do. You don't borrow money to fund social programs. You do it responsibly. With regards to the Liberals, they promised childcare in 93. Had they delivered it, we would have had it by now, and many children would have gone through it and benefited from it. They promise this in every election. They don't deliver. They campaign to the left. They govern to the right. We've seen this time after time, and it will happen again.
Stephen, you wanted to respond to that?
Going back to 1993, you would have heard this, and then you would have seen 12 consecutive surpluses and a booming economy. We had a national child care plan. Paul Martin had it in place, but Jack Layton pulled the plug on it, and that's why we don't have one today.
Ethan?
Yeah, the Liberals are saying, you know, if you'd just given us one more mandate, we would have done it. And they went down because of the sponsorship scandal. People, you kicked them out because of corruption. You've seen this before, and you'll do it again.
We'll open the floor. Roger?
Yes, the sponsorship scandal, that was one for the record books for sure.
John?
Well, it's neat to see these two parties fighting about what each other's has done or not done. But let's look at the record of the Conservative Party on any number of infrastructure issues. We've committed to the largest and longest infrastructure funding in Canadian history, $53 billion over 10 years. This is money that's targeted to a variety of different priorities, but including one that's small community funds. Here in Perth-Wellington, all of our municipalities fall under the small community fund. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to working with each of our municipalities. There's 11 of them here in Perth-Wellington, 2 upper tiers and then 9 lower tiers. So I'm looking forward to, or single tier. Looking forward to working with them on deciding what the priorities they see as fit, and then working through the New Building Canada Fund to invest in the priorities that matter to our local municipalities.
We got 1 minute left. Ethan, be quick.
Well, one of the problems with Conservative funding commitments is they'll allocate a bunch so they can brag about how much money they're going to spend, and they don't allow the departments to spend it so they can brag about how much money they've saved. They did this at Veterans Affairs to the tune of $1.1 billion. They've done it to our national security apparatus, the RCMP, CSIS, and Border Security, to the tune of $10.8 billion since 2006. One of the casualties of this voodoo accounting program was the RCMP's anti-child pornography program. This has real consequences to it. We need to allocate the money that's needed and then spend it and plan it over the long term so departments can plan accordingly.
Okay. We're going to move on to the next question here. We're fighting time. We've got about a half an hour left. This one is addressed to Mr. Nader. And, you know, we've been talking about the seniors, but we do have some young voters that are coming out too, John. As an individual who has just entered voting age, I'm very excited, looking towards the future. The future, I believe, is reliant on a clean environment. I noticed your flyer does not contain any information on an environmental plan. Why is this, and what are your plans for improving our environmental conditions?
A great question, and it's an important question for all people of all ages, because the environment is there for all of us. There's no option B. There's no second environment. So in terms of the environment, I'm very proud to be part of a party and part of a government that actually lowered greenhouse gas emissions in Canada for the first time in Canadian history. Under 2005 levels in 2013, we lowered greenhouse gas emissions by 3.1%. At the same time, the economy grew by over 12%. So it is possible to respect the environment while also growing the economy. I would say that we favor a sector-by-sector regulatory approach, working with the different industries in collaboration with our international partners to ensure that our regulations match other countries, so we're all working towards the same common goal.
How do we do that if China and the Americans are doing the same thing?
And that's the major problem. We need to have a harmonization of our things. The challenge is, you know, the Liberals will sign Kyoto and then allow the greenhouse gas emissions to skyrocket right afterwards. But what we need to do is focus on the regulations we can have within our economy, and that's why we've seen a reduction in Canada working in collaboration. We do not favor a carbon tax or a cap and trade system, which is solely a revenue-generating tool and not actually addressing the concerns of greenhouse gas emissions.
How's Mr. McCotter looking at this?
Great. Thanks, Eddie. With regards to what Mr. Nader said there about the end there about the Liberal failure to deliver on Kyoto, that part was accurate. Everything else, well, I'll let you people use your own discernment on that one. The NDP's plan is to meet Canada's international obligations with regards to climate change and carbon emission reductions. We do favor a cap and trade system, and I think that this issue illustrates just how much the new Conservative Party differs from the old one. Cap and trade was brought in by George Bush Sr. and Brian Mulroney to fight acid rain. It worked, and now we've got this Conservative Party saying it's a vast socialist scheme. All right? No, it's a responsible plan. It has worked before. It can work again. With regards to the carbon tax, we don't favor that because if alternative fuel sources don't exist or if alternative transportation sources don't exist, it's merely a tax on workers and it doesn't actually reduce carbon emissions. So we favor cap and trade. Tom Mulcair was Environment Minister in Quebec. He was successful in reducing carbon emissions. He's got the leadership and the experience on this file to deliver.
We'll come back to that in just a moment. Irma DeVries.
We think that there's an awful lot of political heat that's generating huge profits for some environmental companies, such as wind turbines, and unmanageable costs for you, the citizen, with higher electricity rates. But this is still not helping the environment, and we need to use that money that's being spent on stopping CO2. We need to use that to stop volatile organic chemicals, water pollution, sewage treatment, all that stuff. And as a young voter, I'd like to talk to you. You're going to go to university and you're going to get a wonderful degree and you're going to say, oh my word, I've got a huge debt. The Christian Heritage Party wants to offer you a 10-year moratorium before you have to pay back that student debt, because by then you'll be well established, you'll have a good job, and then it'll be much easier for you to pay that debt.
Okay, good. Roger, your thoughts about the environment and that situation for the young voters out there?
At the end of the day, there's really nothing more important at all than our environment. We only have one planet, and we have to leave something to future generations. And in fact, in my opinion, we don't own these lands. We merely borrow them from our children. And at the end of the day, when all our money is gone and everything like that, the only thing that will be left is this planet. I haven't seen the Conservatives do one doggone thing to help the environment, and I haven't seen them step up to the plate. I see them talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. And I don't see that changing anytime soon, and I am some upset about it.
Okay. A lot of people are, as you can tell. Stephen, the Liberals, how would they handle it?
Well, if I thought there was a person in this room that felt Stephen Harper did a good job on the environment, I would go on about it, but I'm not. I'm going to talk about what we're going to do. Part of the infrastructure spend, it has the three components. I told you social infrastructure that I've touched on, but the other two are very, very interesting from an environmental perspective. Number one, our $20 billion public transit commitment. This will get cars off the road. It'll get people moving. Number two is $20 billion in green initiatives. So this is climate resilient infrastructure. This is wastewater and water treatment plants. This is real money being spent on real climate change initiatives. So on top of that, we have other exciting things. Under Stephen Harper, 1.3% of marine and coastal areas are under protection right now. We'll raise that to 5% by 2017 and 10% by 2020. So Justin Trudeau has a wonderful platform for the environment, and we're going to try and reverse what Mr. Harper's done in the last 10 years.
We'll open up the floor here, talk more about the environment and the issues. John, I don't know if there's anything more that you wanted to pass on to our folks.
Sure, I would just like to know whether or not the Liberals have consulted with local farmers about the small creek that might run through their backyard, whether they want DFO regulations overseeing those small creeks. We'll let the Liberals account for that. But in terms of green energy, in terms of things like that, we're not going to go down the path of the Ontario Liberals, where they've foisted upon unwanted communities massive industrial wind turbines, operate at a low efficiency level. That's not the route we're going to take. We're going to focus on the key sector-by-sector regulatory approach to cap emissions, to work in that direction, and that's why we're going to see reductions in emissions, greenhouse gas emissions over the long term.
With that in mind too, the wind turbines, is that more provincial or is that federal?
Yeah, unfortunately it's more of a provincial matter, and it's unfortunate that we're not going to see action from the provincial government on that. At the federal level, we're focused on working to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The Green Energy Act in Ontario has been a failure. It's driven up costs of electricity, and it's hurting small businesses, and it's hurting families.
Irma, I know you wanted to say something.
Well, as a green energy producer, I can tell you that it's a bureaucratic nightmare. It's really a difficult road to hoe. The Christian Heritage Party believes that we need to look after transit, and we'd like to use infrastructural programs to build transit to help the environment, to build those kind of things that will protect us from using too many carbon-based fuels, etc. We want to look after the environment in a proper way, but we need to do that using the infrastructure grants to renew our infrastructure so that we have better facilities for you in the future.
Okay. Roger, I know you wanted to pass on something.
Once again, the Conservatives are talking the talk but not walking the walk, because they are actually in favor of burying tons and tons of nuclear radioactive waste right beside the Great Lakes Basin, which is the biggest drinking water source in North America and serves 40 million people. Now that could be an environmental disaster, folks.
Okay. Ethan?
Go back to what I said earlier in this debate. International Monetary Fund pegs Canada's fossil fuel subsidies at $34 billion a year. We need to start weaning off that, and we can use that to fund the new economy that is sustainable, healthy, and secure for multiple generations.
Mr. Nader, did you have anything to respond to that?
No, I think at the end of the day, what we need to focus on is the priorities of Canadians, the pocketbook issues. I don't think anyone in this room would really, at the end of the day, support increasing the cost on everything, as would be done with either of my opponents' programs.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Next question is for Mr. McCotter. Many economic studies have shown the benefits of investment into the arts. What specifically would a Liberal government do to support Stratford's artistic community?
Well, we do a number of things. From a high-level perspective, we would double the amount that the Canadian Council for the Arts gets. Mr. Harper has failed to properly fund that. Number two, we'd reverse the cuts to the CBC, so from a cultural perspective. In addition to reversing it, we would further fund it. And finally, and I'm very excited to say, is that under our $20 billion infrastructure spend, cultural spend is part of that. So the Stratford Festival will be fully available to apply to the municipality and say, we're interested in getting some of your social infrastructure, because culture is an imperative part of Stratford and Canada, and our infrastructure spend, which is, again, I repeat this, not conditional, it will flow, so you can put people in council that get some Stratford Festival investment coming.
Okay. Culture and tourism seem to go hand in hand.
Absolutely, and we're blessed here in Perth-Wellington to have a number of key cultural attractions, whether it be the Stratford Festival, Stratford Summer Music, the Drayton Festival, the Springworks Festival. We are truly blessed to have these great key tourism and economic drivers here in our local economy. I'm proud that during the economic turmoil of 2008-2009, the government invested $6 million over 2 years in the Stratford Festival through the Marquee Tourism Program. That program is still benefiting the festival today through the awareness that was raised internationally on the marketing campaign that occurred then. Just recently, it was great to see a $3 million investment in collaboration both with Sieg, the Stratford Enterprise and Economic Development Corporation, with the Stratford Festival to invest in the Stratford Festival HD project, bringing the high-definition Stratford Festival plays to a national and international audience, both through the educational institutions and through the CBC.
Ethan, how important is this to the NDP, about the artistic community? Is it high on the list for the NDP? It's vital. It's very high on the list. The NDP has always supported and defended arts and culture in this country. A few of the programs that we're going to do, Tom Mulcair announced $30 million to promote tourism into this region and get more people coming to the Stratford Festival, Stratford Summer Music. We're also going to bring in income averaging for artists. Anyone here who is an artist? Yeah, thank you. You know that your income's not exactly consistent. It can be a lot one year, it can be a little the next year. We'll bring in income averaging so that you are taxed at a fair level consistently. With regards to the CBC, I sit on the board of directors for the Friends of Canadian Broadcasting. The Conservatives have indeed destroyed the CBC, but the biggest cuts happened under the Liberals in the 1990s. We're going to reverse those cuts and restore the CBC's autonomy. Irma DeVries, how would you handle this aspect of it?
The arts are a very important part of our culture, and a CHP government would support the arts within the framework of infrastructure to increase public access. It has to be neutral. It has to be worthy of public support, such as theaters, concert halls, museums, and galleries, to make the arts accessible at reasonable prices. We will not provide cash grants to individual performers, but we would use the public funds for that which is uplifting and ennobling to the human spirit. We also believe that the arts should not be used to promote political ideology.
Okay. Roger Furr, how would you handle this, especially the arts in Stratford and area?
Having grown up in this area, I can tell you that it's a vital component of this area, and as your MP, I would absolutely be advocating to at least maintain the existing financial support for that, and I would not tolerate seeing any cuts, that's for sure.
Okay. With that in mind too, does the dollar have, we've seen the dollar fall, but we've seen the Americans and other visitors come to Canada. Does that have any bearing on it as well?
Absolutely, the low dollar does have an impact here in southern Ontario. If you look at the great population of Canada, we are close to the American border, so that is an option for destination for a day trip or a weekend trip is always an option here in Ontario, and that's what part of the Marquee Tourism Program promoted. I just want to quickly comment on the CBC. I'm proud that we've invested on an annual basis over $1 billion in the CBC. Going forward, the CBC is an important cultural institution in Canada. And as we move into a more and more digital age, we need to look at exactly what type of program, what type of services the CBC will be offering going forward. I just want to say very briefly, I found it disappointing that for every national leaders debate, the CBC opted not to carry the free live feed of the leaders debate. Instead, during the most recent one, they ran an episode of Coronation Street. I think that's unfortunate because the CBC is our national broadcaster, and when we have a national leaders debate, it would have been nice for them to have carried that live.
How important, Ethan, is it to have a national broadcaster?
It's essential. The CBC is a source of national pride, at least it was for Canadians, and it can be again with adequate funding and political independence. It's necessary for us to tell our stories to ourselves. We're a big country. We need those national institutions that pull us together. With regards to Mr. Harper having issues with the CBC, not carrying something or not covering something, look, 11 of the 14 CBC executives are Conservative Party donors. He could have picked up the phone and called one of them.
I'll throw this out there. Do we need a national broadcaster in this internet age and in the age of YouTube?
I would say we need it now more than ever. This is now the time when we need that national leadership, national vision. And the CBC has to evolve, but you're not going to get it to evolve by slashing it back and muzzling its autonomy, taking away its autonomy. It needs to be invested in and built upon and not slashed back.
Stephen?
Yeah, no question. I talked about our restoring the funding, but another big thing is we'd review the appointment process for the board of directors because Mr. Harper just stacked it with his like-minded friends is the best way I could put it.
John, we'll give you the last word here.
Well, first of all, the CBC is an arm's-length Crown corporation, so I don't think it's that great of an idea for the opposition to be proposing specific content measures for the CBC. But what needs to happen is a review of the entire mandate of the CBC. It's important that we have CBC Radio Canada as a national broadcaster and have them involved and have a key role in a growing digital economy. Now, I know I rely on the CBC for one of my key news sources, watching live feeds, a variety of different things. A lot of people in my generation do a similar thing, but we still need both the radio side of things, the television side of things, and the new media side of things, whether it be online or elsewhere.
The CBC is an arm's-length Crown corporation, so is VIA, and it has a conservative president, and we've seen how that's turned out, so.
Ethan?
VIA Rail is not quite a Crown corporation. It's quasi-autonomous because it was actually created by a decree of the cabinet, not through an act of parliament. But also the VIA Rail, much like the CBC, was destroyed by the Liberals before the Conservatives got their hands on it.
Okay. We'll do one more question, and then I believe we've got to do the tail end. Is that correct, Mark? We'll let the candidates do one last spiel before we let everybody get out of here. We've got one more question here. And this is to Irma. Would you please tell us about Bill C-51? In your own words, what is it? What effect will it have on Canadians? And what does your party plan to do about it if elected?
The Christian Heritage Party does not like omnibus bills, and that's what C-51 was. There's a lot of things that slipped in there when it came to security in our nation, and that is very concerning. I think there's so many new surveillance techniques that are offered through that Bill C-51 that could be very detrimental to your private lives. However, We do need some security in Canada. I have not examined the bill in great detail, so I really can't say a whole lot as to what our party is going to be doing about it, but we definitely don't like omnibus bills. We want to see each of these things debated because we need to have a better democracy where more ideas come to the table. And as a fringe party candidate, I hope that there's many things that I've said today that you'll be piqued to check out and learn about.
Okay. Roger, as an independent, what does C-51 mean to you?
To me, it means the biggest loss of personal freedom that I've ever seen in this country. I think all of our World War veterans would be very disappointed with what's in this agreement in this bill after they put their lives on the line to defend those personal freedoms. And I'm very disappointed that it was passed in Ottawa. As a Liberal, what does this Bill C-51 mean to you?
Canadians expect their government to balance their safety, but their personal rights. Mr. Harper wants you to think there's a terrorist behind every tree. Mr. McCotter doesn't think we should do anything on safety. So we have a balanced...
Give him some time. We're going to be fighting time here, folks. Continue.
Right. So, you know, the bill, when first presented, had measures that kept Canadians more safe, but it was extremely problematic. So at committee, we brought in a number of changes. We removed the CSIS police powers. We limited the sharing of information. We raised thresholds, and we removed the word lawful from protest. But that's not enough. If the Conservatives are elected again, the bill is going to stay as it is, and it can't stay the way it is. We're going to fix the bill. We're going to bring in parliamentary oversight, and we're also going to put a sunset clause on the bill. Just like after September 11th, it'll be there for a little period of time, but it'll be monitored, and we'll ensure that the security agencies are doing what they need to do to keep Canadians safe while protecting your rights and freedoms.
Okay. We've been hearing a lot about this in the news, especially directed to the Prime Minister.
So the primary role of any government is to keep Canadians safe, plain and simple. We need to have a safe society. And I think most Canadians understand that freedom and security go hand in hand. Bill C-51, the measures contained in it are measures that are already in place in most of our international allies countries, including information sharing. Sharing of information among government departments as it relates specifically to national security concerns. Second is the criminalization of the promotion of terrorist activities, preventing that from happening. And third, giving power to disrupt, under a judicial warrant, a terrorist act before it occurs. So ending a terrorist act, preventing it from happening before there's a loss of life, before there's bloodshed on Canadian soil.
Okay. The NDP approach to the Bill C-51. Ethan?
The NDP is opposed to Bill C-51. We voted against it, and we will repeal it. You can applaud for that. With regard, Mr. Nader just used the term terrorist. When Mr. McKay was asked to define terrorism, because this Bill C-51 doesn't do that, his answer to the journalist literally was, look it up. Right? This is the issue. This is what the Canadian Civil Liberties Association has a problem with Bill C-51 on. It's that it's very vague, it's very nebulous, it can be used in 100 different ways, and that's the problem with C-51. To respond to Mr. McCotter saying that Mr. Mulcair is going to do nothing on national security, there's actually something that can be done, and I referenced it earlier in this debate. We can properly fund the national security apparatus. If we want to defend ourselves against terrorism, and it is a threat, then let's actually fund it adequately. The Conservatives have clawed back $10.8 billion from CSIS, from the RCMP, and from border security. Let's give the security personnel the funding they need to do their jobs, and then let them keep us safe.
Okay. Let's open up. We'll throw the question out there, and how do we define what's terrorism and what's some crazies after a Blue Jays World Series win?
Well, don't jinx it yet about the Blue Jays win. We want to get through a couple more weeks on that first. But let's be very clear. The measures under Bill C-51, including the measures to disrupt a terrorist act before it occurs, are all governed under judicial oversight. We need the warrant of a judge before any of that occurs. So this is all contained within the documents, and I hope that my colleagues would take the liberty of reading the document before commenting on it further.
I've heard the phrase "Big Brother" being used at all.
Well, it's striking a balance, you know, like last October we had the soldier run down by the gentleman, and we had a shooting in Parliament. Those people had some serious ideologies that were not just people after a Blue Jay game. So it's important that we strike a balance. You have to balance security with rights, and we're the only party that is taking a reasonable approach to this issue.
Okay, Ethan?
the Liberals' approach to this issue is to vote for Bill C-51, and I'm quoting Mr. Trudeau, to deny him an election issue. Okay, that's the Liberal approach on this one. The NDP has opposed this bill. It does not strike a proper balance between freedom and security. I repeat, if we want to keep this country safe, we got to adequately fund the national security apparatus.
Irma, did you want to say anything?
I'm going to be short and sweet. If there's not enough checks and balances in this legislation for the present government to trust a future government with it, then there's not enough checks and balances. Let's revisit it.
Anybody else got anything? If not, then we've got about 10 minutes left. We started at this end of the table. We'll start at the other end and just ask that question, and I'm sure everybody has that question on their mind. Why should we vote for you? Tell us a little bit more about yourself in closing comments, Ethan.
Sure. Well, thank you, Eddie. And thank you again to everyone for coming here tonight. As I said in my opening, why you should vote for me is that this election is about change, and the NDP is the agent of change here in Perth-Wellington and right across this great country. The other two parties represent continuity, regardless of what they tell you during an election campaign. They will never deliver. You've seen this dog and pony show before. It's time to put a stop to it. Tom Mulcair has visited this riding an unprecedented 4 times. He is the only major party leader to come here, meet with local residents, and listen to your concerns. Tom Mulcair believes in the people of Perth-Wellington, and so do I. People want change. Tom Mulcair is the only leader with the experience and the principles to get the job done. And just keep this in the back of your mind. Pharmacare, childcare, healthcare, Mulcair. The NDP came second.
Mr. Nader, your closing comments. John.
First of all, thank you once again to the Stratford Chamber of Commerce for hosting tonight's debate, and to you, Eddie, for moderating an excellent debate. It was excellent, well done. One of the things I enjoy most about being a candidate for office is to meet with voters, both in venues like this or at the doorstep. And what I hear time and time again from people across this great riding is that they're optimistic about the future. Things aren't perfect, things will never be perfect in the world, but they're optimistic. That they support the Prime Minister's leadership, and they support the undertakings we've done to lower the cost of living, to leave a little more money in everyone's pockets, to support families, to support seniors, and to work on behalf of our small business owners so they can hire new people and drive the economy. I'm proud to be the son of a pig farmer. I'm proud to be the son-in-law of dairy farmers, and I truly believe that my rural roots are what led me to public service. I've been involved in public service in one form or another for the past 12 and a half years, whether at the provincial, federal, or municipal levels. It's something I cherish, and it's something I want to work hard on behalf of the citizens of Perth-Wellington. Something I can promise you is you'll never need to wonder where I stand on the important issues that matter to the people of Perth-Wellington.
Thank you, John. Stephen McCotter.
Well, I think you should consider me for your vote because I have the passion, both at a Canadian level but also a Perth-Wellington level. I have integrity, I have ability, I have experience. We share a common goal with a great number of people in this crowd, is that after 10 years it's time for Stephen Harper to go. So I'm appealing to anybody out there that shares this view. This is a very, very close election, and the balance of power could ride in this room tonight. So I'm asking you all to take a very close look at the platforms and the candidates and the future of Canada, and make a decision that we can put our country back on track on October 19th.
Stephen McCotter, thank you. As an independent, Roger Fuhrer, your closing comments tonight.
Thanks very much to everyone in the room and the Chamber, of course. Over the last couple of weeks, I've heard a ton of campaign promises from my opponents. I think they're trying to get Perth-Wellington voters to develop a love for fiction. If I hear the words tax credit program or investment another couple hundred times, I might need some more Alka-Seltzer. It is so easy to make promises about spending someone else's money, and that, folks, is what the political parties excel at. I will make you only one promise. As your MP, I promise to use complete due diligence with the matters before the House of Commons and vote on each and every matter in support of Perth-Wellington's wants and needs. Also, I want to see more people voting in this election, especially younger folks who clearly have the most to lose. Another huge issue is red tape. We have a lot of good programs in this country, but the usual scenario seems to be that the people who need the program are unable to access it, and the funds within the programs are eaten up by layer after layer of bureaucracy. We need to trim the fat at the top and get those monies to those who need them. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Irma DeVries from the Christian Heritage Party, your closing comments.
My husband John and I have lived and worked and volunteered here in Perth-Wellington for 36 years. It hurts to see what's happening in Canada. So much is wrong. The parties and the politicians, the activist courts, the judges, all of these are taking us in the wrong direction, away from common sense, away from practical values like hard work, responsibility, and accountability, away from integrity, faith, and freedom, from being self-reliant and independent, away from serving and giving to others, the family, the real traditional family. We need to protect the unborn. We need to protect the elderly. I cannot stand idly by. A vote for Irma DeVries and the Christian Heritage Party is a vote for a fighter. I've been here 8 times now. To change the status quo, to fight the rot, and to move Canada in the right direction. As your MP, I will work to serve you. Thank you.
We've still got a few minutes left. I don't know if anybody had any closing questions, any other questions that needed to be addressed. This is a serious issue that we've got coming up. It's October the 19th that we've got an election. We also have got a lot of people that don't vote. That was happening in the last election, is that we wanted to get people to vote. And maybe I'll throw this at the candidates, is just encouraging them to get out to vote. John, you had your hand up, then we'll go to Ethan.
Absolutely. I mean, we are blessed to live in a country where we have the democratic freedom to get out and vote. My grandparents came to Canada in 1952, and as soon as they received their Canadian citizenship, they voted in every election since then. Those of you who lived through the war and saw the sacrifice made overseas, you know. I was so pleased to have Art Boone at my office opening earlier during this campaign and hear the stories from him overseas. And the work that he did on the beaches of Normandy, liberating Holland for our freedom. There's no excuse not to vote. We have 4 days of advance polling, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday of the Thanksgiving weekend coming up. Election day, it takes just a couple of minutes. There's lots of opportunities, and encourage you to vote.
Ethan, you wanted to add to that too?
Just to repeat and echo what Mr. Nader said, especially about the people who fought and died for our freedoms, and voting is a way to honor that. My military record is not near what Art Boone's was, but I did serve 3 years in the Canadian Armed Forces, and it's an excellent way to exercise what was fought for and what was bled for. And the other thing too is, don't underestimate your ability to make a change and to make a difference. This is, I think, a big thing that drives people away. One of the reasons why Rachel Notley toppled the Conservative fortress in Alberta is that young people increased their voter turnout by about 20%. That was a big factor in changing the government there, and if people do show up, especially young people, we can change the government here too.
Stephen McCotter. Just encouraging everybody to get out to vote.
Certainly, I think it's really important that everybody realizes there are advanced polls this weekend, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, I think 9:30 to 9:30, and I encourage everybody to give it a crack this weekend, because the Fair Elections Act that Harper brought in, probably you'll need two attempts to vote.
Roger, we'll give you one last stab at this.
Voter apathy is totally understandable, given trying to muck your way through all the campaign promises up here. I don't know if you folks have a scorecard out there or how you keep track of that. But anyways, get out and vote.
Yeah. Irma, you wanted to reflect the same thing.
I'd like to say, please get out and vote, and if you're tired of the big 3 parties, make a change, vote for somebody else. Vote for Irma DeVries, Christian Heritage Party.
Before we let you go, thank you to Rogers for helping out, the volunteers, the media that came out tonight to support this, and to make sure you are informed. Whatever you think of the people on stage, you got to give them credit, because we've got people that are trying to serve our community and this riding. So I hope you give them a round of applause for that. My hat's off to everybody here, our volunteers tonight. Thank you for being here. Make sure you get out October the 19th. Make sure you vote. And we've got one more debate for the Chamber of Commerce. That's next week in St. Mary's. Thank you so much for being here. Have a good night. Safe drive home.